Zoe, welcome to the Personal Best podcast.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing, first of all?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
How are you?
I'm good. This is my second podcast of the day.
Oh, gosh.
But I'm really,
Social
really
batteries.
excited.
What phase of your
Afterwards,
cycle
it will
are you
be.
in? You're in the ovulation
Right
phase?
now, we're in the follicular phase.
Gorgeous. Oh,
so
perfect.
I'm feeling good.
Social butterfly.
Yeah.
Same as
me. But I'm really excited to have this conversation because obviously this podcast does focus about health and fitness and self-improvement, but I think it's really important to realise that there's so many factors that actually go into us becoming the healthiest and happiest versions of ourselves, and particularly us as women. There's a lot of things that maybe we don't even realise can impact our health and everything. And when I came across your content a while ago and I was seeing you talk about like periods and hormone health and women's health issues, I was like, this is so interesting. I didn't know all of this information. So good to have you here. And I really want people to leave this conversation feeling a bit more informed and a bit more empowered.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, definitely. Like they understand their body a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. That's the goal. And also just want to say that nothing is too taboo or
Absolutely
TMI
not.
or off limits.
We'll talk about everything.
Amazing. So yeah, before we get into some of like the informative, like practical side of things, give me a little bit of a personal intro about you and the journey that you've been on.
Yeah, so my journey with my hormones started really when I was around 18 years old. So I talk about, if you haven't followed me or anything, I talk about PCOS, hormones, menstrual cycles, all sorts of women's health, girly stuff that we go through online, just through experience of my personal issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, got diagnosed with PCOS where I had really cystic acne, and I started noticing these like black hairs coming out of my neck. And I was like, oh gosh, what's that? Alongside irregular periods. So then went to the doctors, got diagnosed.
And what is PCOS for people that might not know?
Yes, so PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Yeah.
And it's basically a hormone imbalance. So a lot of women's root causes of PCOS can differ. So some women may struggle with insulin resistance, which is where your body can't respond to sugar as well. Some women, like myself, struggle with adrenal function, where our stress response is a bit all over the place. And then some women may even struggle with inflammatory, so maybe gut related, kind of like that sort of side. So it's such a complex syndrome. And with modern medicine, we often get these blanket treatments. So, you know, take the pill, cut carbohydrates, things like, come back when you want to get pregnant, or take a diabetes drug. And it's just like, when every woman is so different and their hormones are so different with what they're dealing with, you can't just give these one size
fits all,
treatments. And it's just frustrating because I think it's like the average appointment for a doctor is 7 minutes, but you think how long it would take to decode a whole women's health history, their lifestyle, everything that's impacting them. And I think it's like, I don't know if it's 85% or 65%, correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows. I think it's 65% or something is the diseases that go on in our body comes from our lifestyle and our environment.
Yeah.
So there's a root of these hormone issues. Are you stressed? Are you eating too much sugar? You know, are you not getting enough sleep? And it's just going back to what your body's obviously reacting in this way because you're not giving it what it needs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I want to get onto, is that we definitely focus a lot more on like the prescription rather than the causation. And it's like, right, take this pill, do this thing. And it's like, actually, should I be having these symptoms in the first place, right? And can I do something to like help them? But obviously you said then that you were dealing with PCOS and a few symptoms that came up with that. When you did seek medical help, what was the response?
Yes, so I was put on the birth control pill, which I thought at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to like fix me. This is going to cure me. And as like a young girl, I think it's so sad that we aren't well informed enough to make those kind of decisions at that young age, you know, like it's crazy how we're not really taught about the side effects. We're not taught about what it actually does to our body. So I went on the pill, and yes, it did get rid of my acne, which maybe at a young age was a good thing, I don't know. But then eventually when I did come off it, it came back 100 times worse.
Right.
And a lot of women do say that they feel like their PCOS has been caused by the pill. Because I definitely think mine was made a lot worse after going on the pill.
But it's always worth exploring, I think. And I've had friends that have had quite bad experiences on the pill and then gone back to the doctors, and they're so dismissive of it, and they're like, no, it can't be the pill. But that's the only thing that's changed. So you're like, well, my lifestyle's not changed, you know, I'm still healthy, etc., but I've taken this pill and I'm not feeling great, so something must be wrong.
Because so many women say that they struggle with anxiety and depression, and even it changes our brain so much, the pill. There's a lot of studies out that show that, because it does shut off our ovulation, so we're not producing our female sex hormones, and the pill steals that hormone progesterone, which has so many protective properties, like it reduces inflammation, it's so important for our brain health, our heart health, it's that anti-anxiety hormone. So when you're losing that because of the pill and you're not naturally producing it, it's gonna obviously have an effect. And even some women, it changes who you're attracted to. Have you heard that?
I wanted to bring this up, which is wild.
Because I feel like in my experience, my first boyfriend that I met him when I wasn't on the pill, and I couldn't stand him, right? Then, year later, I was on the pill, I met him, suddenly fell in love with him. But now that I'm off the pill, I'm like,
you can see it again.
So I'm like, that's actually crazy. Apparently we do go for men, the women who take the pill tend to go for men with more feminine qualities.
That's what I've heard, and I don't know how much research they've done into it, but there's definitely enough anecdotal evidence to suggest that is happening. And also, I suppose, just to clarify, if you are taking a contraceptive pill, you're not ovulating. So then estrogen's not working. And actually, as some women might know, that when you are ovulating, you can feel it, like your libido increases. Like, I fancy everybody around me.
I know, it's so bad when I'm ovulating. I'm like, I'm in the gym and I'm thinking like, oh, I wonder what I don't want to say it on here, I'll tell you what I'm thinking later, but I think some like very naughty things.
But that's the thing.
Intrusive.
So if the pill shuts that off, then it's quite difficult to know what your brain and body is actually thinking and feeling. So that's really interesting that obviously you went to the doctors, they prescribed you the pill, you came off, obviously the PCOS symptoms came back. How did you then try to get control of your hormones? What's that journey been like?
So I kind of feel like I've been through a lot of hormonal havoc with my journey, because then I did go through a really bad phase of undereating, which is like the worst thing you can do for your hormones, undereating, over exercising. And that kind of came off of the back of being told that I had to cut carbohydrates. But it was also, you know, us women, it's that feeling of just thinking that your worth is based on your body and how slim you are and how small you are. But I always kind of justified the way that I was eating, because I was like, I've got PCOS, so I actually don't need to eat these carbohydrates.
I see.
But
Is that to reduce insulin or something?
Right. Because the carbohydrates will impact our
That was
insulin.
The logic.
Yes.
Okay.
But women need carbohydrates. Like, they are so important for our ovulation. They are our main source of energy. So I really cut carbohydrates. I lost a lot of weight. So I went down that phase of, you know, feeling good. You know, you feel good for a hot minute when you've lost all this weight, which I didn't need to lose. But then after a while, your body goes into survival mode, because it's like, okay, you're not giving me anything to eat, I'm just going to shut off your period, which then will shut off your digestion. And you've got to think, like, if your body's just trying to survive, it's not going to prioritise things like your digestion, your skin health, your nail health. You know, they're just going to prioritise your survival.
Yeah.
So you're taken out of that rest and digest, and you're put in that fight and flight response, which after a few years of under eating, I got that really puffy face, like it's called moon face, where you have a lot of cortisol.
And it's like inflammation.
Yeah, inflammation. My skin was really bad. I had no personality. Not to mention the fact that food just consumes your life, doesn't it, when you're in that situation. So I don't think a lot of women know the side effects of under eating.
So interesting, just to interject, but like hearing you talk about that, because that was sort of my experience in my later teen years. Like I was really underweight, over exercising, under eating, and I went to the doctors because I was 17 and I hadn't started my period. But I also was with a boyfriend at the time, so I wanted to get the pill. So I never started my period naturally.
Oh my gosh.
Never. And I wonder now.
That's so interesting.
Exactly, because I really wonder now, if I hadn't just gone on the pill at 17, would it have come naturally once I'd gained a bit of weight and been a bit healthier?
Yeah.
Because the reality was, like, my body fat percentage was so low. Like you say, your body's not in a position of like, let's have a baby.
We can't even feed you, so how are we going to feed
and
a
I
baby?
actually feel so lucky that since I haven't been on the pill, I have a very healthy regular cycle, which we'll get into, but never started my period, which is really strange.
What age did you start it at?
So when I came off the pill the first time I was 19, and it basically was back to normal.
Yeah.
But I never had that initial thing because I just went on the pill.
Oh my gosh,
which is so
crazy.
Strange. But it's exactly that thing of like, your body's just not
it's
in
but
a
it's like, why
cycle.
has your doctor not asked you these questions? It's like I went to the doctors for shakes when I was going through this under eating, had no period, wasn't sleeping, had really bad PMS, I had shakes, my eye used to twitch, and he told me it was a benign tremor. Then I had the Dutch test, which is a really good hormone test if any woman is struggling with their hormones and just cannot figure out what's going on. I really do recommend the Dutch test. And I had really high cortisol levels, and with really high cortisol levels, you get the shakes, you get the eye twitches.
It's like stress. That's your body's stress response.
But I got told I've got a benign tremor.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just find that the doctors, when it comes to women's hormones, they're just so vacant.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's either come back when you want to get pregnant, these problems are just part of being a woman, or you're just dismissed and just feel like you're almost gaslighting you a bit, you know.
But I think that's a really important issue around this topic, and it's exactly why I want to be having this conversation today, because we've just normalized things which shouldn't be normal.
No.
It's like, really painful periods, like you've just got to deal with it, take some painkillers, or like any of the other side effects of hormonal imbalances have almost been normalized as well. And like, every time I hear this topic spoken about, it's always, there's a lack of research, there's not enough research. Like, it wasn't until last year that they actually used blood to test sanitary products.
Oh, I heard that.
So until last year, they were using, like saline solution or something, which is not the same thing. Anybody who bleeds will know that that's not the same thing. And that's just one small example of like the crazy amount of research that we need to do.
Yeah. Well, I think it was 1993 that women were allowed into clinical trials.
Yeah.
Because all our hormones were always seen as an anomaly, because our hormones change throughout our cycle. So they thought, oh no. Yeah. Not going to test on them because they're too flaky. They're not reliable.
We're half the population.
I know.
But sorry.
Frustrating.
No, we'll just
That's
end up
literally
ranting.
like the topic I could just rant about.
I know, but I want to like sort of tie these two things together. So obviously you are somebody that's really worked on their health as someone who's dealt with hormonal issues and things.
Yeah.
And a massive part of that is understanding the menstrual cycle and how it affects us as women. So I think it would be good to talk about what the cycle is exactly, because I think we're
Yes.
taught from school that a period is you bleed for a few days a month and that's that. But actually there's so much that goes into it,
Yeah.
and we do operate on a monthly basis. Our hormones change all the time. Just wondered if we could like dig into some of the science.
Yes. So a lot of women think that the period is the end of the cycle,
Right.
but the period's actually the first day of a new cycle. So period day 1 is cycle day 1. So that's when we have our menstrual phase, which is when we're bleeding, the uterine line is shedding, and that's when our hormones are at their lowest. So we are most like a male at that point in our cycle, without, you know, the bleeding, but
Yeah.
with our hormones being at their lowest, we're most like a male there. And then we have the follicular phase, which is the second phase, which our estrogen starts to increase, which means that we start to feel a bit more energized. I notice it, like I feel like because you can align the cycles with the seasons,
Yeah,
which
I've
is
heard
quite
you
a lovely
explain
thing.
it like this before.
Yeah, so winter is the menstrual phase, and then spring is follicular, and I always like to think I'm like this budding flower, you know, like blooming.
Yeah.
And I do feel like that, like when you actually get in tune with your body, it's probably my favorite part of the cycle, because I just love that feeling of like I've just come out of the luteal, the menstrual phase, which are quite like lower energy phases, and then it's like the follicular, it's like get yourself out there. And then we have the ovulation phase, which is where our estrogen gets to its highest point, and we also see a surge in testosterone. That's why we get like the libido increase, so we're like very turned on by everything. And this is where you may start to notice, if you do ovulate, you'll get the fertile like cervical mucus.
Yeah.
So that's a really good indication of whether you are ovulating, as well as you're changing in temperature.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting, because we've never been taught these things. You know, our temperature changes so much across our cycle, and it can show us so much about whether we're ovulating, like all sorts.
Yeah.
So after you ovulate, your temperature does increase, because as we come into the luteal phase, which is the fourth phase of the cycle, also known as like the premenstrual phase, we start to produce our hormone progesterone. So that's why our temperature increases, because progesterone has these thermal properties to them. So if you are ovulating consistently, you'll notice after you ovulate, after you get that fertile cervical mucus, you'll see your temperature increase.
Yeah.
And that's a really good sign, because we want that progesterone, because we want to have that natural anti-anxiety hormone in the fourth phase of our cycle, because we obviously get those horrible PMS symptoms, don't we? So I think that for a lot of women, that luteal phase can be the most challenging phase, because you know, it is that PMS phase where we get things like irritability, bloating, more water retention, sugar cravings, low energy fatigue, and there's all sorts of reasons why these things happen. But there's a lot of things that we can do with our lifestyle and our diet to change that.
Yeah.
Which is really empowering, because you often think, oh, I just feel like crap in the week before my period. And it's like, okay, 1 week out of the month, you're just accepting that you feel like absolute shit.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when that doesn't have to be the narrative.
No, definitely not. And I think just knowing that information is so interesting to me. And like from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes so much sense, right? Because it's like you're in that follicular phase, you're feeling good, you're almost signaling, I'm about to be fertile, I can have a baby. And then you have the ovulation phase where in theory you would try and procreate. And then afterwards you've got that like slower, sluggish phase, because your body's thinking you're impregnated. So like when you look at it like that, obviously we're going to change throughout the cycle,
for sure.
And it's so important for people to realize that and to notice the changes. But I guess what advice would you give for people to track that, to get to know themselves and to get to know their cycle? Because everybody is going to be different, right?
Yeah, of course. I think the science can act as a guide, but some women get moody around ovulation, which can sometimes be due to the the sensitivity to the hormone changes, or it could be another underlying issue that needs to kind of be addressed. But so I think the first step is really to understand the 4 phases, and then I would get a cycle tracking app. So there's a lot of cycle tracking apps out there: Flow, Natural Cycles. I like Temp Drop. And then track your cycle and see how long your cycles are, see how long your periods are, because a healthy menstrual cycle should be around 21 to 35 days long.
Yeah.
So if you're getting a cycle 40 days and then you're getting a 35 days and it's constantly like that, potentially there could be something to investigate. Whereas it's amazing if your cycle is like clockwork. And that's actually a really good sign that everything's kind of working, which is good. And you, with the course that I did with the menstrual cycle course, there was a lot of case studies, and often you'd see a lot of changes in the women's menstrual cycle, like how regular it was with other symptoms. So they'd come alongside those other symptoms, you know. So I think that's a really great way to start, you know, just looking at the basics. How long is my cycle? Is it coming regularly? I'd do that for about 3 months whilst tracking your symptoms as well. So how do you feel around ovulation? How do you feel in the luteal phase and on your period? And then I would go into more advanced cycle tracking, which I found like the most just eye-opening and feeling so connected with my body by doing that. And that's the cervical mucus and the temperature tracking that I previously mentioned. But I think it's really important, because we just think these things are normal, but when you have PMS, severe PMS, it's actually like, right, what's causing this?
I think everything you said there is really interesting, because it's just about getting to know your own body. And like you said, you've got this like guidebook in front of you, or like this manual of like, this is how your body is probably going to work. But we're all so different, and I think once you do start tracking, and obviously you can track different symptoms and how you're feeling at different points in the month, it just makes you feel so in tune with your own body. And I've often found that before I was tracking my cycle, it was always that like week before my period where I would just feel in such a low mood and irritable and emotional and a bit fluffy, like I'd put on weight, and, you know, my workouts are feeling rubbish. And all of it would be explained the minute I started my period.
It's like post-period
Every
clarity.
time it was like, oh, that's why I've been so down all week. But once I started tracking that, sometimes those symptoms do come in, but you can manage them, and you realise that, okay, I've been here before. I know what this is. And also it makes you appreciate the highs, like when you are feeling good and you are in that follicular phase or the ovulatory phase.
Definitely.
It's like, oh, okay, I know why I feel like this now.
And it's like adapting your lifestyle to fit that. Because I can imagine a lot of women in that luteal phase, that fluffy feeling, we all know how that feels, because it's the water retention. And I've probably done it in the past where I thought, oh, I need to go on a diet.
I was always doing that.
I need to cut my calories. And then you get into this cycle, and it's like, actually, no, I need to give my body more compassion here. It is a natural response. I am going to be a bit more bloated, but actually it's a time where I can really love myself and just accept that these are...
You haven't put on loads of weight in a week or a few days. It's literally the body's like natural cycle. But so sort of to like tie the things together then, obviously, like this is a normal pattern of like a healthy menstrual cycle, which some people will be like, yeah, that's me, I get that. My periods are pretty regular. I can recognise like where I'm at in my cycle. But there will also be people who do have irregular cycles and their periods are a bit all over the place, and maybe they can relate to some of the like hormonal things that you've spoken about. So how, I know it's not easy, but how could people get back to a regular cycle and get control of their hormones?
So I actually used to struggle with irregular cycles. It is a characteristic of PCOS, irregular periods, irregular cycles. And what actually, weirdly, what regulated mine was cycle syncing, because, and I know that sounds really like contradictory because you have to have a regular period to cycle sync, but you can kind of you can almost cycle sync when you have an irregular cycle, because you will notice the changes in your body. You may notice the fertile, like cervical mucus at certain points in your cycle, the temperature changes, and that's how I really got to regulate my cycle, by tracking my temperatures, my cervical mucus, because you can still get those signals from your body. But with cycle syncing, I mean, my cycles were around 45 days. And I did do the cycle syncing, so there was always a period where I'd stop and rest, and just stopping and resting regulated my cycle. I've spoke on my socials recently about the fact that I've just completely stepped away from like pushing my body in the gym and just added more low intensity exercise, and that has made such a difference. It's regulated my cycles, it's completely got rid of my acne, all of my gut issues have gone. And I think for women who are struggling with irregular periods and their hormones, I really think that stress can be such a big component to look at. You know, alongside potential nutritional deficiencies, maybe is there something going on with your gut? But I think stress is like such an overlooked part, because when it comes to our hormones, we have insulin and cortisol. So insulin is our hormone that helps us respond to sugar, and then we have cortisol, which is how we respond to stress, also known as like the adrenal hormone, right? And these are the two top tier hormones. So these, like, think of these as like the big hormones, right? And if these are imbalanced, that's going to have an effect on all of our sex hormones, so progesterone, estrogen. So think of estrogen and progesterone as like the inferior. And these insulin and cortisol are really big hormones, because if they're out of balance, all of these hormones are going to be out of balance, which causes so many other hormonal conditions. So I think it's really important to look at the root, whether it is a stress issue, whether it could be something to do with insulin, maybe your blood sugars are all dysregulated. So I think for someone who is struggling with their hormones, I would potentially look at those two as like root causes.
Definitely. I mean, like, stress can manifest itself physically in so many ways. Like I said, I'm quite fortunate now. I have a pretty regular cycle. It's all working fine. But the times where it goes off is always times of stress. Either it will be a week late or it will come a week early, and I'm like, what's going on? But it's probably because my body's just gone so out of whack. Like, it doesn't really know what it's doing anymore. And I think people obviously struggle with it in different ways, in terms of like, when your hormones are out of balance, like, there can be so many symptoms that come along with that. And I think it can be really frustrating for people, maybe when you don't know what's happening with your own body. So what advice would you give for people to sort of, you know, get a bit more control in a way
of their hormones? Oh, like actual steps that they can take. So
like things that you've done.
So I would always start with blood sugar balancing as a start. I think all women can benefit from that. I think as a term it sounds really like, what the hell is that? And I feel like because I've done it for quite a few years now, I'm like, blood sugar balance. But I don't think, maybe a lot of people don't understand what it means. But basically we want to keep insulin balance. That's the, you know, hormone imbalances basically means we want to keep our hormones in a nice balance, you know. So with insulin, we want to make sure that it's nice and balanced, and by blood sugar balancing, that's how we can do that. And you'll notice if your blood sugar levels are dysregulated, if you have things like sugar cravings, you wake up in the middle of the night, you have to have a sweet treat at like 2-3 p.m, you crash, you get shaky, and the imbalanced blood sugars could be because you're not eating enough, you're not eating regular meals, you're skipping meals, so your blood sugar balances are off. Or it could be that you're not having enough protein. So when you eat a carbohydrate, your blood sugar spikes, and then naturally it's going to come down. And it's like, if you don't have anything to kind of slow down the digestion of sugar, you're going to be on this roller coaster throughout the day.
Yeah,
and that's why protein's so important. So I would say 3 tips for blood sugar balance. Let's say always pair your carbohydrate with a protein and fat. So let's just do an example. You have some rice. Let's have it with a chicken breast and some veg, and some olive oil. And then a second little tip is to make sure you're eating consistent meals. So you're not waiting until 6 p.m. to have your first meal.
Yeah.
Or you're not having a coffee for breakfast and then you're waiting till 4 p.m. to have actual food, you know? So that's really important for balancing your blood sugar levels. And let's think of another one. Switch your carbohydrates, to have more whole carbohydrates, so sweet potatoes, brown rice or white rice, either or, instead of white bread. And I hate saying, because I've been through disordered eating. That's something I've struggled with my PCOS. It's, there are foods that are gonna affect you in different ways, and it's not labeling them as bad, but it's, a sweet potato is gonna be better than a piece of white processed bread, and it's gonna have a lot more nutrients in there. That white bread doesn't have.
I guess you just need to look at it as not from a place of restriction. It's like you're trying to help your body. You're trying to give it all the things it needs to function.
Change to sourdough.
Yeah, love
that's
sourdough.
Been fermented. Oh my gosh, them years of thinking I couldn't eat bread. I'm like, sourdough, I have that every day. And I'm fine. I'm fine with sourdough. Sure. And I've even had women message me who have been told that they're celiac and they've eaten sourdough and they're fine.
Yeah. Which
is crazy because it's got a lower gluten. So I just moved towards more whole complex carbohydrates rather than the processed ones.
Sure. So I think obviously blood sugar balancing doesn't need to be scary.
No,
those tips are really useful.
Yes, it's just a scientific word.
Yeah. But what other changes can people make?
Yes.
I know you said that you've obviously changed your exercise routine a bit. How has that helped as well?
Yeah, so I'd say start with the blood sugar balancing first, which will help control insulin. And then I'd go to nurturing your adrenals. So this is where it comes to stress, because as we said, the cortisol is that other top tier hormone. And when someone says reduce stress, you can't make stress go away, can you? I think 2 things for me that have really helped, and this is very recently in my journey, is just reducing the intensity, just realising that less is more. I think I've been caught up in the fitness industry where, we have to work out 5 times a week, we have to be pushing. We have to be pushing the weights. And I understand if you've got strength goals, if you've got physique goals, and that is your goal. But when it comes to balancing hormones and just not feeling the need to
go against your body all the time.
In that luteal phase, we are less resilient to stress. We are weaker. And I've noticed such a difference since adding low intensity, and I actually crave things like Pilates. Me 2 years ago, Pilates, I'd be like, absolutely not. What the hell? No, give me some weights and a high intensity workout. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. I just feel like it feels nice and just soft, and I don't need to be pushing my body all the time.
No.
And less is more. Because
I think that's something I'm trying to sort of strike the balance of with this podcast and the things I talk about, is because I want to remind women that they can do hard things.
Oh, of course.
And they can, do marathons and crazy workouts if they want to, but also we're not mini men.
No.
And that we do need to treat our bodies differently and with a bit of compassion. And if you are in the lead up to your period and you're feeling really lethargic, maybe you've got some aches and pains and stuff, maybe it's not the best time to go and push your body through hell.
Because even I was thinking the other day, as a woman, if you're a woman starting out a new training program and you start it in the luteal phase and then you go and you don't like it, then you've got this just feeling towards the gym that's like, oh, I hate that, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But no, it might be because you've actually gone at the wrong time in your cycle and you thought it was really hard. But it's, you know, and that those sort of things we do need to take into consideration. And it does frustrate me because I feel like I've been seeing a lot of videos online, not like slating cycle syncing, but kind of seeing it as another rule that we need to add, another thing that we need to add into our life, or another wellness trend. But it's literally just understanding your body as a woman and how our sleep changes, our energy changes, our motivation, our mood changes. And not even that, but some women struggle with severe PMS, PMDD, things like that. And it's like, if you're constantly pushing your body, like, you're just giving yourself these expectations for yourself and making yourself feel more
and it's not like this whole idea of, you know, working with your cycle, it's not like strict rules that you've got to abide by. It's not like, no, you can't go do a long distance run on your period. Of course you can. If you feel like you can, then go and do that. But I think it's so good to sort of have this guidebook that's there so that at least you can get to know yourself a bit more and like work with your body, not against it. Yeah,
definitely. And I think, as we said like before, stress has such a big impact on our cycle.
Yeah.
Especially exercise, which I've noticed massively.
Yeah.
Like, that's the one thing that I've noticed just with my hormones, is just reducing the intensity. And then another thing with stress is your perception of stress. Like recently I went to Bali.
Yeah.
And before that I was really stuck. I felt really stressed. I was negative. And I felt so ungrateful because my thoughts were so negative. And I thought, okay, I'll go to Bali to cure all my problems. I was running away, expensive therapy. And then I went out there and the same things, if not worse, were coming up.
Right.
With my thoughts. And like, I think your thoughts is a stress to your body, because how you think can manifest physically in your body. And if you're saying nasty things to yourself or having really negative thoughts, like, that is a stress, you know. So I think often like changing your perception to things can really help with stress. And like, I've been doing some hypnotherapy recently, and it's just kind of reprogramming your subconscious brain. I don't know if you've looked much into that.
Not done it myself. I know a bit.
Yeah, but we often have these self-limiting beliefs that are so deeply rooted, and they can be triggered by so many different things in your life, especially as you get older and you notice them. And when you actually don't sit there and understand where these thoughts have come from, why are they there, you're just like living your life with these really negative self-limiting thought patterns and beliefs. That's so stressful. Like,
that's so true. It's like constantly having a friend or someone in your life who's constantly nagging at you and saying mean things and criticizing you. And if you had that person in your life, they'd obviously cause stress and you'd want to get rid of them. But that's literally our internal dialogue some of the time.
I know. And your thoughts are so powerful. And they say, you know, master your inner voice and you master your life.
Yeah.
And that's been such a big thing for me recently, because I feel like I've often overlooked the mental and emotional. I've always gone towards the physical. How can I train? How can I eat? How can I have more sleep? And me and my brother once had this debate a few years back, and he went, the mind is more powerful than the body. And I said, no, the body is definitely more powerful than the mind. But I now agree that the mind is actually so freaking powerful.
Yeah. And like, our mind controls our body. So that makes so much sense.
So I think changing your thoughts and changing the way you speak to yourself is such a way to reduce stress.
Because I've heard you also mention that as part of your journey, that when you were dealing with all these PCOS symptoms, you would talk quite negatively to yourself. So how have you, I guess, managed to get out of that?
So I I got a bit upset the other day because it was almost like a deja vu moment. I was sitting in the same place where I'd sit and I'd say things like, oh, you're so ugly. Just things like, oh, you're so gross. Like, this is so embarrassing. And if you're saying those things to yourself, your body's going to believe it. You know, your body doesn't actually know the difference between what you're imagining and what is real. So if I imagine to myself, oh, I'm beautiful, I know that's difficult at times when you might not feel beautiful, but it's really just changing the way you speak to yourself, and your body, yourself will eventually believe those things. And for me, definitely it was getting vulnerable. It was opening up online and not seeing it as like such a scary thing.
But I think that's what's so good about your content, and probably why a lot of people resonate with it, is that you are normalizing these things for other people and stuff that, you know, we don't always want to like show off online, like acne and stuff. But actually, when someone can look at that and think, oh, I deal with that, or that's similar to my experience, it makes them feel more comfortable and makes them more accepting of themselves as well.
Definitely.
But I really want to, just before we round this up, I really want to bring like men into this conversation, because obviously, you know, periods are unique to females and stuff, but what do you think men need to understand about women's cycles and everything?
So actually, before we go into it, one of my Hinge prompts, I deleted all dating apps, but before that, my Hinge prompt was, the way to my heart is know how women's menstrual cycle works. And oh my gosh, some of the replies I would get absolutely hilarious, like, oh, you're just a moody bitch, things like that.
Really?
Or it's like they try and go through the stages and then they say, like, the ends one, you're moody, you're irritable. And I think that's how men kind of see it. I think
that is the connotations that have been put on it, though.
Yeah, like it frustrates me because I think the menstrual cycle, our periods, are seen as such a negative thing.
Yeah.
But when's the day that it's actually a positive, empowering thing? Like, we have this beautiful cycle that goes throughout, you know, our life, and the reason why we get all these symptoms related to our cycle, it's a message from our body saying, girl, like, something's up. Something's wrong. A lot of the time, PMS, if women get a lot of that irritability, PMS, it's because they're too stressed. It's a lot of the time it's due to low progesterone levels and too high cortisol levels. So it's like, no, guys, these girls have valid reasons why they feel this way. They're not just, it's not just like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're not just like destined to feel like that, because you can have cycles where you are PMS3. You might get a little bit of bloating, and I think for men it's really important to know that we're going to need like different support, different needs throughout our cycle, with things like sex as well. Like like even like birth control, men need to just, I feel like we're almost just like, you deal with it, that's just normal for you. And we actually need more open conversations with our partners about these things, because some women don't want to go on the pill. Therefore, their boyfriend, their partner, it should also be kind of his responsibility to understand, when is she ovulating? How can we help her, you know, to understand these things? And I think that would make such a better relationship between two people if they can understand the cycle together.
Definitely. I think there's just like needs to be that element of communication, and I think it doesn't have to be like this big taboo topic. It's literally like, this is how I'm feeling, this is why, this is what you can do. And know that that can change month to month as well. Like you said, sometimes your PMS symptoms might be bad and you need a bit of, you know, TLC, or just a bit of like compassion or something. Or if you are a bit irritable, there needs to be a conversation, like, it's not you necessarily, but like, this is just how I'm feeling.
I sometimes think the last relationship I was in, sometimes I think, oh my gosh, like, I've probably caused arguments in my luteal phase, not probably because I wasn't in tune with my cycle that much then, not realising like that's probably why I've been a bit more aggy. And I think it's just understanding that. Or you might even get to the luteal phase and think, oh, do I actually fancy you? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I remember when we met at that fitness event, and there was a talk all about periods and stuff, and I remember one girl saying that for like a few days of the month she doesn't fancy her boyfriend. And like, sorry guys if that scares you, but it's really true. And also, just something to add to that conversation is that obviously our hormones and men's hormones are so different, because men's hormones are on a 24-hour basis, and I know that they can have issues with like testosterone levels and stuff, so they're not exempt from having hormonal problems, but on the whole it's not something that they really have to think about. Right?
And it's I think another reason why a lot of women struggle with their hormones is because we're living lifestyles that have been created on the basis of a guy's hormonal pattern, like the 9 till 5. That is literally like, we need period leave. we need luteal phase leave. That's why it's so important for us to adapt.
Yes.
And work might be a stress in that luteal phase, but actually what's another stress? Is that exercise going to be a stress for me? Should I just go on a lovely peaceful morning walk and listen to a podcast? I'd love doing that. Like, sometimes I get that thing in my brain where it's like, go and do. No, you need to do something high intensity. You need to lift weights. But then I'm actually like, no, what do you actually want to do? And I sit there and I'm like, actually, a walk
would be really nice
in the sun. Get outside. I don't want to be in a sweaty gym lifting weights.
And that's not nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've got a bit of exercise in. It's going to boost your mood. You're going to feel so much better for it. And like, that should be celebrated rather than like beating yourself up with like, oh, I didn't do that hard workout I planned. But there's honestly so much I could talk about. Like, I think this is just an endless topic. But this is the Personal Best podcast. And if you had to share one piece of advice, you could share a quote or something to help people achieve their personal best in whatever capacity that is, what would it be?
I would say to remember and realise that your body is capable of so much more than being in pain, than being confused. And I feel like if you have the confidence in yourself to make the right choices, the right nutrition and lifestyle changes, your body will be able to heal itself and believe that it can.
I love that. I love that so much. And I think it's just having confidence in your body.
And trusting in it again.
And not normalising suffering and thinking this is just something I've got to deal with, because it's not. And I get, as we've spoken about, it can be really frustrating when you do seek medical help and you're sort of met with you can be a bit dismissed or misunderstood. You can then feel quite helpless, but actually there's so much that you can do. And I think that is
so much in your power.
And I think that's nice, and that's exactly what I want, I guess, the closing message to be, is for people to feel empowered, and that their cycle and their hormones shouldn't hinder them, and actually you can use it as a superpower.
Use it as a superpower.
We are superwomen.
We are superwomen.
Amazing. Well, where can people go if they want to find you, look at any of your content?
Yes, so I'm on TikTok and Instagram, Zoe Antonia, and I'm launching something very exciting, literally in the next few weeks. So,
any hints?
We'll be able to help a lot more women, very one-to-one.
Well, perfect. Obviously people have to stay tuned for that one.
Yes.
But thank you so much for this conversation today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, my love.
And thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you.